Okay, what we're going to do in this video is randomly divide our entire data set into an estimation data set with 80% of the data and a validation data set with 20% of the data. To start, we're going to create a column called rand ID, and this is going to be the new ID that we're going to generate. And it will allow us, by generating this random ID, it'll make it easier for us to separate randomly out our estimation from our validation data set. Remember that the estimation data set has 80% of the observations of our entire data set, and the validation data set will have 20%. After we've created this column, we want to use the pivot table. The pivot table, we're going to use it to, and we'll place the ID in the row labels. This will give us a list of the unique IDs in the data set. As you'll remember, in the original data set, each person answered 9 choice tasks, and as a result, there are 9 observations. What we want to do is get a list only of the unique IDs, because we're going to remove, when we separate our data set in between the 80% and the 20%, we want to remove 80% of the people, not just 80% of the questions. So here we have a list of the unique IDs of the people in the data set. So we're going to select this. You'll see that it goes from 1 all the way to 1185. We're going to copy it, go to a new table that I've called IDs, and in the original ID column, we're going to paste the unique IDs. Now what we're going to do is for each of the unique original IDs, we're going to associate a random number to it. We are then going to be able to use the random number to divide the IDs between those that should be in the estimation data set and those that should be in the validation data set. In order to do that, we're going to use a function called rand in Excel. And what rand does is it produces a number between 0 and 1, a random number between 0 and 1. And we're going to use this in a minute. So first thing, we need to assign for each of the original IDs a random number. So we've already created this, we've already put in this function, and now if we approach the cell that has the random number in it now from the bottom right, when the cursor changes from a white cross to a black cross, we can then click, if we double click now, we will have, it will fill the entire column of the rand column. So now you'll see that we have numbers associated with each of our original IDs, and that these numbers all are between 0 and 1, and they're all different. One thing that's a little bit tricky is that every time that you want to do anything in the sheet, say you were to add a number here, well, you'll see that the random column changes. So anytime you do something in the sheet, new random numbers are created. So what we need to do after having generated our random numbers is we need to select this column, copy it, go back to the top, and then we are going to paste special. So these numbers that appear in the random column now are just numbers. They're no longer a function. So they won't change if we do something else in the sheet. Great. So now what we want to do is we want to sort this table by our randomly generated numbers. That's the first thing that we're going to do. So we have to copy. We don't have to copy. We have to select the column or the table that we want to sort. We'll go to Data. We're going to sort, and we want to sort by this random number. And we can do it from smallest to largest or largest to smallest, but smallest to largest is the default, so that's easier. So now you'll see that each of the numbers that before were sorted, or rather the table before was sorted by the original ID, now it's sorted by the random ID. And as a result of that, our original IDs are in a random order. the next thing we want to do is associate a random, what we're going to call the random ID, with the original ID, and this is relatively straightforward. We are just going to have a unique ID that will increase by 1 for each of the IDs in the table. Now, we could do this by hand, one by one. That would take an awfully long time. So another little trick we can do is if we select both the 1 and the 2, and we approach the box, the selected box, from the bottom right, when our cursor changes to a dark cross, we can double click on it. Oh. We can double click on it, and then Excel will fill in the rest of the numbers, incrementing by 1, all the way to the bottom. So we have 932 original IDs that are now randomly assigned from 1 to 2. Now the one other thing, well, not the one other thing, we also need to establish how many observation, or how many IDs there are in the 80% and how many there are in the 20%. Now the easiest way to do that is just to do a quick little calculation. So if we say estimation IDs, estimation IDs is going to equal the number of unique IDs that we have. We know that's 932, so this is going to equal 932, and we'll multiply it by 0.8 or 80%, 74.56. Hang on one sec. Oh, I made a mistake. It should be 0.8, not 0.08. So we have 746. If we round that, that becomes 746. So the estimation IDs, there should be 746. So now what we're going to do is take this information, we're going to go back to our original table, and now we're going to use VLOOKUP. If you don't know how to use VLOOKUP, there's another video that I just made that is associated on YouTube to this website, and so you can find out how to use the VLOOKUP. So now we're going to associate our original IDs to our new randomly generated IDs. We're going to use VLOOKUP. The first argument of VLOOKUP is our lookup value, which is going to be the ID. The second is going to be our table that we need to use to look up the random IDs, and that is found in this worksheet IDs that we just created. And our table is going to include, well, it's going to be this whole table here. The first 3 columns, and it's important, like I explained in the VLOOKUP video, to have $ before all the letters and all the numbers in the table array. Also, the column index is where we're going to take the information about the random IDs. So we know that the original IDs are in the first column and the random IDs are in the third column. So we're going to type in 3 here, and we want this to match exactly. So that's what our function looks like. And so now we see that the original ID is 199, the random ID is 499. Like we've done before, if we approach the selected cell from the bottom right, when the cursor cross turns dark, we can double click and our function is filled in everywhere by Excel all the way to the bottom. So now for each of the IDs we have our randomly generated ID. So now we're almost there. What we're going to do now is we're going to estimate. We're not going to estimate, my apologies. We're going to sort our data, this time using our random ID. So we go to data, we're going to sort by random ID. And so now we'll see that our data set has been reorganized, and now it's reorganized so that it's sorted by the random ID. So before, our ID was 1081, and so this observation would have appeared way down in our data set. Now it appears first, and then the second one is 990, was originally 999, but now it's associated with 2. So now it's easy for us to select our estimation and our validation data sets. What we're going to do is we're going to choose the first 80% of the observations associated with the RAND ID, so the first 80% of the IDs, which, if you'll recall, is 746. So we're going to take the first 746 individuals, represented by random IDs 1 all the way to 747. So we are going to select this, and we're going to go all the way down until it says 747. Yeah, go. $747. We're going to copy this. We're going to put this into our estimation data set. I'm going to copy the heading and put this into our validation data set. Go back to our original data set, and now from random ID 748, we can begin and go to the end of our data set. We're going to copy that, put this in our validation data set, and there we are. We now have been able to separate our original Swiss Metro data set into 2 randomly divided data sets, one with 80%, the estimation data set, and the other with the 20% remaining, the validation data set.